There's a family you've never heard of that made the Sacklers look like amateurs. A dynasty that didn't just profit from addiction. They industrialized it, weaponized it, and turned an entire nation into their customer base. The Sackler family, the ones behind OxyContin, destroyed hundreds of thousands of American lives and made $20 billion before anyone stopped them. But a century before that, another family did the exact same thing on a scale 10 times larger. They addicted millions. They destroyed generations. They shaped the entire economy of Asia. And when it was over, when the bodies were counted and the damage was done, they didn't go to prison. They got knighthoods. They got statues. They got their names carved into hospitals and universities, because that's how drug empires work. You make your money destroying lives. You launder it through charity. And by the time anyone realizes what happened, you're too respectable to touch. This is the story of the Sassoon family, the opium cartel that built modern India, bankrupted China, and walked away as heroes. And if you think this is ancient history, if you think we learned our lesson, look at your medicine cabinet. Because the same playbook is running right now. The names changed, the drug changed, but the con is identical, and it's happening on an even larger scale. Let's start in 1832. A Jewish merchant family flees Baghdad. They're running from persecution, from a governor who's squeezing them for money, threatening imprisonment, maybe worse. David Sassoon, the patriarch, takes his family first to Iran. Then, calculating his next move, he looks at the map and sees British India, specifically Bombay, a colonial port city exploding with trade, cotton pouring out, silver pouring in, and most importantly, the British East India Company operating with zero oversight and infinite greed. But here's what you need to understand about what David Sassoon was walking into. The British East India Company wasn't a company in any modern sense. It was a corporate state. It had its own army, its own courts, its own laws. It controlled territory larger than all of Europe. And it answered to nobody except its shareholders back in London. By the 1830s, the company had colonized India not through official government action, but through pure corporate conquest. They'd fought wars, annexed kingdoms, and turned an entire subcontinent into a profit center. And their biggest product, the thing that generated more revenue than anything else, was opium. David Sassoon arrives with almost nothing. But he has three things that matter more than money. He has connections, a network of merchants across the Middle East built by his father, who served as chief treasurer in Baghdad. These weren't casual business relationships. These were deep family and religious ties, bonds of trust that couldn't be bought. In a world where contracts were hard to enforce and trust was currency, those networks were worth more than gold. He has knowledge. He understands court politics, trade routes, and how to read power. His father's position in Baghdad taught him how governments work, how officials think, and most importantly, how to position yourself as useful to people in power. And he has timing. Because he arrives just as the British are solving their biggest economic problem by turning India into a drug factory. But timing alone doesn't make you rich. You have to understand what you're seeing. And David Sassoon understood immediately. He saw that the British had created a perfect criminal enterprise with legal protection. And he saw that there was room at the table for anyone willing to do the work they needed done. Here's the context you need to understand. Britain is obsessed with Chinese goods. Tea, silk, porcelain. The British upper classes are addicted to tea. By the early 1800s, every household in Britain drinks tea daily. It's not a luxury anymore, it's a necessity. And all of it comes from China. But China doesn't want anything Britain makes. The Chinese look at British wool, British manufactured goods, British anything, and they're not interested. They have better silk, they have better porcelain, they have everything they need. So when British merchants show up wanting to buy tea, the Chinese say, fine, pay us in silver. And that's what happens. Every year, millions of pounds of silver flow out of British coffers into Chinese hands. The trade deficit is staggering. By some estimates, Britain is losing 8 million pounds of silver annually. That's hundreds of millions in today's money, just vanishing into China. And it's economically unsustainable. The empire is bleeding wealth. The British try everything. They try selling manufactured goods. No interest. They try negotiating better terms. China refuses. They try opening diplomatic channels. China isn't interested in equal relationships with foreign barbarians. The Chinese emperor sees Britain as a minor tributary state, not a peer. So the British are stuck. They need Chinese goods. China doesn't need British goods. And the silver keeps flowing out. This is an existential economic crisis. If it continues, Britain's entire monetary system could collapse. So they come up with a solution. And it's one of the most evil economic strategies in history. Grow opium in India. Massive fields of poppies cultivated under British supervision. Then flood China with it. Get millions of Chinese addicted. And suddenly, instead of Chinese merchants demanding silver for tea, Chinese addicts are paying silver for opium. The trade deficit reverses. Britain profits. India becomes a narcotics plantation. And China drowns in addiction. Let's be clear about what this means. The British are deliberately creating a drug epidemic. They're doing it with full knowledge of what opium does. Opium was already known in Europe. It was understood to be addictive and destructive. British doctors used it medically in tiny, controlled doses, but they knew that large-scale consumption led to dependency, physical ruin, and death. They knew this, and they did it anyway, because the economics worked.